Hey guys, in this video I'm reacting to how they actually caught Jeffrey Dahmer. Let's see what this video is about. Let's go.
After beer number one, the teenage Jeffrey Dahmer, already a budding alcoholic, sits in his hideaway fantasizing about a male jogger he often sees running down the street. For some strange reason, his attraction to this fully grown man is somehow connected to the thrill he gets from dissecting roadkill. Young Dahmer has no idea how his obsession with collecting bones and cutting apart dead animals will be intertwined with his lust. He opens another beer, and then another, and so on until he's drunk. He peers through the window of his hut. There's a blue sky above. A blue jay perches on the branch of a tree and lets out its unmistakable screech. He scrunches a beer can and opens another. Nature, he thinks, while looking at the bird. I must be a freak of nature. He's aware that something could be wrong with him. He wants to kill. He knows it's not.
People sometimes don't want to admit that something is wrong, but apparently know something was wrong. Why don't you get no help? Like, if you know you're sick in the head, try to get some help. Because you are just doing whatever. Whatever. Mm-mm.
Right, but it's a feeling he just can't push back. He gets his baseball bat and waits behind a bush for the jogger to run down that same route again. Young Jeff doesn't know what he'll do. Not really. Maybe he'll knock him out, he thinks, and then keep the body. It just so happens that the man didn't jog that day. These were the warped thoughts of a boy that would become known as the Milwaukee Monster, a deserving epithet if there ever was one. Dahmer's atrocious crimes not only shocked a nation, but his actions have perplexed medical science. He may have been a monster, but Dahmer was also soft-spoken, intelligent, and strange as it sounds, he came across as a likable guy.
It's always the same. They always seem like a nice person. They always seem like, the nice neighbor, the nice this, the nice that. Nice where? The whole time they sick in the head trying to plot on you and stuff like that, and you just there laughing with them.
That's perhaps one reason why it took so long to arrest him. He almost operated in full view of the cops. He was hardly a mastermind when it came to concealing his crimes. In fact, it's as if sometimes he wanted to be caught, and yet it took so long. We might ask how the killer was caught, but in Dahmer's case, another question needs to be asked. How didn't anyone realize he was a distressed and messed up kid? He came from a broken
Right.
family, a family that was likely a little more broken than documentary films have made out. His mother, it seems, was what you might have called the overbearing type of matriarch. She was moody, often depressed, argumentative, and she wanted constant attention. This kind of behavior does not bode well for children in the family. She was a wreck, and by the time Dahmer was old enough to go to school, she was spending most of her days in bed. The household wasn't much fun at all for young Dahmer, especially since his father was away so much of the time. When he was back, the parents argued all the time. This is something that affected Dahmer deeply, more so after his mother tried and failed to take her own life. But by the time
Oh, this is messed up. But I mean, most of the time, like you said, when people are sick, let's say when they sick in the head or when they are psychopath or whatever that your child might be, there are little stuff that must tell you that okay, maybe something's not right here. Maybe something is not okay. I mean, don't they have grandparents? Don't they have friends? Nothing? Because 9 times out of 10, you will know when something's wrong with your child. Mm-mm.
she was pregnant with another child, she wasn't much better. So this could have been the genesis of a killer in the making.
But the parents weren't any help either, so there's not much that could have been done. Because if the parents were decent parents, let's say like that, I mean, I don't even want to use the word decent, but the mother tried to unalive herself and all of that. It's kind of like, okay, there's obviously some mental health issue that's going on, and wasn't nobody there to snatch the kid, or wasn't nobody there to, get the mother the treatment that she needed. All of this be adding up to this situation.
But then a lot of kids grow up in chaotic households and they end up just fine. Many
I have to agree with that too. A lot of kids grow up in messy households, but they don't be out here doing all these things. Child.
killers experience extreme physical violence from their parents when they're young, but with Dahmer, it was more being put on the sidelines as his mother fell apart that seemed to bother him. He didn't like being abandoned, and that may explain his utter depravity later in life. After he was arrested, he always said his parents' blustery relationship didn't make him the way he was, but it would be hard to deny it shaped his very peculiar personality. His father was an analytical chemist, and unbeknownst to him, it was teaching his son some things about science, which would some of the grisliest crimes the USA, or the world for that matter, has seen in modern times. He taught his son how to bleach and preserve bones, something Dahmer evidently took on board,
Oh,
even at such a young age.
oh.
Sometimes they would look around the garden and under the house for dead animals. When they found one, the father would show his son how you could bleach the skin and connective tissue from an animal. Young Dahmer was obsessed with this.
Listen, one thing I heard about psychopaths, they will start killing animals. And when I say animals, I don't mean like roaches. I don't mean like that. I mean they start killing cats, dogs. So if your child is out here doing some weird stuff, maybe you need to take the kid to doctor or something. And the fact that the father taught him, and this is such a weird thing to teach your child to kill animals. That is so weird. Listen, I think the dad is also not good in that. There's no way the dad can be good. And he's out teaching his child how to kill animals. Mm-mm.
But not in a way his father thought. Jeff loved the end product, the pile of shiny bones. These he and his father used to call fiddlesticks. Later in life, a forensic psychiatrist named Carl Wallstrom asked Dahmer if he ever tortured animals as a child. Hurting defenseless animals is often said to be something serial killers in the making do.
Exactly. That's what I just said. This is what he do. So if you see somebody in your family doing something weird like this, you better keep your distance. Honestly. Mm-mm.
About control, about living out sadistic fantasies. Dahmer told Wallstrom a story. He said when he was in grade school, the teacher asked his class to bring something in. The next day, Dahmer brought a tadpole. At the end of the day, the teacher gave that tadpole to another kid in class. Dahmer was absolutely infuriated. So much so, he went around to that kid's house. There he saw the tadpole in an aquarium. He poured gasoline in it and set it on
No.
fire. After telling that story, Dahmer turned to the psychiatrist and said, if you want to call that torturing animals, I tortured animals. His parents moved around. When they were together, they argued all the time. The kid got hardly any attention, less so after his brother was born. It gave him plenty of time to think, to go out exploring the nearby woodlands. He'd find dead animals and dissect them in the backyard shed.
Mm-mm.
Once, he even impaled a dog's head on a stick and stuck it in the forest near his house. We won't get into everything here, but as his father later admitted, there were signs that weren't seen. Dahmer was quiet, sometimes moody. He had a shed full of animal parts. He spent much of his free time looking for roadkill. But his parents, as consumed as they were with their own disagreements, failed to see those signs.
That's the issue because parents are out here neglecting their kids, and this is how the kid's gonna turn out. Neglect your kid, and your kid gonna be out here doing whatever with whoever. Come on now. I'll put this also on the parents. Come on now. If y'all would have paid more attention to your child, you will see that something is very wrong with this kid. And the whole gasoline in the fish tank or whatever that was, that's weird.
This was a kid who likely could have been fixed, but instead his problems were.
Fixed is a crazy. Hold on. No, I need to pause it. Fixed is a crazy word. Fixed was a crazy word to use in that sentence. Mm-mm.
Being ignored. In 1978, just a few weeks after he graduated high school, he took his first life. He was living alone at this point in his parents' old house. He picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks, just a young man himself at 18. The two went back to Dahmer's place to drink some beer. Dahmer later said that he found his new friend attractive, but when the conversation turned to attractive girls and how to meet them, he became aware that there'd be no love for him. For a few years, he'd known he was gay. When they were both drunk and the other guy said he wanted to leave, Dahmer went over to a set of weights. He picked up a large dumbbell, walked over to the guy who was sitting in a chair with his back to him, and he whacked him over the head. He subsequently strangled him, stripped him, used his body for sexual gratification, and like the dead animals he'd been so obsessed with, dissected him. Dahmer buried the body, but a few weeks later he dug it up. He then methodically stripped the bones of their flesh and dissolved what he could in acid. The solution that was left over he flushed down the toilet. As for the bones that were left, he crushed them with a sledgehammer, and then threw the fragments around in a nearby forest. After the murder, he tried.
First of all, that sounds like a lot of work. Second of all, what in the world is wrong with this dude or this man? Unbelievable.
His hand at higher education, but his persistent drinking exactly conducive to attaining good grades. He soon dropped out and joined the United States Army just prior to his 19th birthday. We won't go into everything that happened in the Army, but it's reported that he drugged and molested soldiers while stationed in Germany. This is something that became known much later. His drinking habits never really
Mm-mm.
diminished, and by the time he was just shy of 22, he was discharged from the army. At this point in time, his father and stepmother had seen how alcohol was destroying his life. That's the main reason why they sent him to live with his grandmother in West Allis, Wisconsin. She'd always had a calming effect on Dahmer, and they'd hoped she'd guide him out of the darkness. This worked to some extent. But after being fired from a job, he started drinking a lot again and acting out his fantasies. This started by exposing himself to women and children, something he was arrested for. At age 22, he paid $50 after being charged with indecent exposure. Soon after, he landed a job at a mixer at the Milwaukee Ambrosia Chocolate Factory, but his mind was far from settled. It was at this time he started thinking about control again, how he might enact his lurid fantasies on someone who could not say no. At first, he stole a
Mm-mm.
mannequin and used that, but his grandmother was somewhat disturbed by the fact that he had one of those things stuffed into his wardrobe. She made him throw it out. So Dahmer, even more frustrated, was now looking for a human doll to play with. It was around that time that he started frequenting the local gay bars and discos, although his favorite places for finding men were bathhouses. He met men, and at times he had some good times with them, but he was never content because of the fact that they also had some control. If that's confusing, this is what he said after his arrest. I trained myself to view people as objects of pleasure instead of people. His solution was
Yeah, he was in his own world where justice don't exist, where a crime don't exist, where what he's doing is not wrong. Like he was in a whole other dimension. Child. Mm-mm.
to ply people with alcohol. Remember, he could drink a lot, so they would usually
Matter of factly, sure. Because before I said that saying fixing somebody is crazy, but now you need fixing. Usually I don't like to use that word with people because I feel like if you say that somebody needs fixing, it's like you're telling somebody that they're broken or something. It's weird. But in this case, yeah, sure, use it. I'm not even mad at it. I'm not even mad at it.
be the first to reach the point of passing out. He also dropped sleeping pills into their drinks when they weren't looking. It's thought he did this at least 12 times after meeting people in bathhouses. He
Mm-mm.
would wait until they were out, and then he would have his way with them. These were not murders, but the crimes were heinous in themselves. What's strange is that Dahmer was never arrested, likely because no one pressed charges. He was, though, banned from the bathhouses. When he was 26, yet again he was charged with indecent exposure. He got a 1 year probationary sentence for that. Had anyone been able to join a few dots, Dahmer's actions certainly would have portrayed a man on the edge, a dangerous man. But as things
Exactly.
went, those dots were spread far and wide, and the only person that regularly saw him was his grandmother. Nonetheless, Dahmer knew that to satisfy himself, he had to take a different course than exposing himself in public and drugging men he met in saunas. That's when he got the idea to go back to his old ways, how to keep the dead, how to conceal the dead, to do what he wanted to the dead. He
Mm-mm.
began his killing spree. He said the first murder of this new era was an accident. It happened in 1987 when Dahmer was 27. He said he woke up in a hotel and the guy was dead beside him in the bed with blood coming from his mouth. Dahmer left the hotel, got his hands on a large suitcase, and then transported the body back to his grandma's house. There, he dismembered it and got rid of most of it. He kept the head, which he boiled so he could keep the skull for his own sexual gratification. He killed again, much in the same fashion, drugging, strangling, and then dismembering bodies, often keeping skulls. When he was done with those skulls, he'd pulverize them with a hammer and disperse the fragments someplace. Did his grandmother know something strange was going on?
Exactly. I wanted to say that too. Like, did the grandmother know something, but she was just plain stupid? Because ain't no way. Ain't no way.
She actually asked him to leave, not being too fond of him always bringing men back to his room. She even complained about the foul smells in the house, a
Mm-mm.
consequence of human decay. But she never once thought her grandson was a killer. He
Okay.
didn't stop.
Makes
He
sense.
couldn't stop. He killed more, and as his addiction got worse, he took more risks. He later said he found his fifth victim so attractive that he kept the head intact and preserved it. He kept some of the other body parts too. He flayed the corpse in his grandmother's bathtub, got rid of the parts he didn't want, and stored the rest in his room. In 1980,
And the fact that he gives out all these details, they show you that he don't think he's doing nothing wrong. And that's the most twisted and messed up part, in my opinion.
2 days after his 29th birthday, he was given 5 years probation and 1 year in the House of Correction for a sexual assault. He spent some time behind bars, but was allowed to work too. Almost exactly a year after his sentencing, he returned to his grandmother's house to pick up his things, the most valuable to him being the human remains.
Mm-mm.
At his new apartment, he started again. He picked up male prostitutes. He drugged people he met in bars. When they were unconscious, he strangled them. Sometimes he'd pose with their dead bodies. Sometimes he'd sleep with them. Often he'd take photos with them. One time he talked to a severed head while dismembering other parts of the body. All the time this was going on, he told his probation officer how horribly he felt, that he was lonely and depressed, that he often thought about taking his own life. He even alluded to his depraved sexuality, but strangely nothing ever came of it. To most
Mm-mm.
people, he seemed like a nice enough guy with a few problems on his mind. Believe it or not, residents of the apartment complex where he lived had told their landlord they were tired of listening to all the noises coming from that one flat. They said they often heard loud crashes like heavy objects falling. Said a guy in there even used a chainsaw in the middle of the night. They also couldn't stand the terrible smells coming from that apartment. What smelled
Mm-mm.
like dead animals. No one put two and two together. It was as if Dahmer was invisible, untouchable. Then, in 1991, something straight out of the darkest kind of horror story happened. Dahmer had lured a teenager to his apartment. This time, not only subdued the guy with drinks and pills, but when the victim was almost out, he drilled a hole in his skull and
Oh,
injected
nah.
hydrochloric acid into.
I remember this one because I reacted to a Mr. Ballin video, and I remember supposedly he put acid in the hole and the dude was still alive. He walked outside. I don't know if it was police or somebody that found him because he walked out of the apartment and Dahmer came and take him back inside and then murked him. That was crazy.
The hole. It was Dahmer's belief that by putting the acid into the so-called executive suite, the part of the brain called the frontal cortex, he could turn him into a living zombie. He could have someone forever, but that person wouldn't rot like all of his other victims. He left the young man alone on the couch in his zombified state, drank some beer, and then went to a bar. When he returned home, he hoped his zombie would still be there. He wasn't. Dahmer looked for him and saw three women standing over him as he crouched in the street, looking awfully worse for wear. Dahmer tried to convince the women that he was the youth's friend, but they knew something was wrong. They told Dahmer they'd called the cops.
So somebody found him and they called the cops. The crazy part is that the cops let this young boy go back with Dahmer. And I was like, nah, did nobody saw the hole in his head? Or what is going on? It didn't make sense really.
The police turned up quite quickly, but after hearing Dahmer tell them he was the boyfriend of the youth, they believed him. Even when the women told them Dahmer had tried to kidnap the kid, and it was evident he was bleeding from a certain orifice. The cop said to one of
Oh,
the women, "Shut the hell up." They
you have got to be kidding me.
down as a domestic dispute. As you'll see, this interaction in
Mm-mm.
the street would later cause problems for the police. This is yet another time Dahmer should have been caught. Given his
Exactly.
background, this was one hell of a big clue. The cops walked Dahmer and the allegedly drunk boy back up to his apartment, where one of the police noticed a really foul odor. Little did he know that it was the decomposing body of a previous victim. When the cops were gone,
Oh.
Dahmer injected more hydrochloric acid into the head of the youth. It killed him. He killed again, and he took his trophies again. With another man, he tried
Mm-mm.
injecting water into the brain. That didn't create a zombie either. There were more murders and more of Dahmer doing despicable things with body parts. At this time, bits of people were piling up in that apartment. Police still hadn't linked any of the missing people to Dahmer. Then he met 32-year-old Tracy Edwards. This changed everything. He lured Edwards to his apartment too, but after struggling to get one handcuff on him, Edwards became suspicious. He noticed not only an oil drum, but a disgusting smell
Yeah, exactly. I was about to say, don't these people smell something weird? Or are they that messed up that they don't smell nothing? Come on now.
pervading the place. Dahmer also had a tape of The Exorcist Part 3 playing. Suffice to say, things didn't look good. He
Yeah.
knew he had to talk his way out of this. Dahmer then grabbed a knife. He told Edwards he wanted to take photos with him. He put his head against Edwards' chest, saying something about his heartbeat, and then in a calm tone said he was going to rip that heart out and eat it. Time passed, however, mostly because Edwards was able to keep a conversation going. When he had his chance, he punched Dahmer in the face and made a run for it. Out on
Mm-mm.
the street, naked, almost hysterical, he jumped in front of a police car. Shouting
Oh.
at the cops, he said a crazed man had threatened to kill him. He showed them the handcuffs still attached to one of his hands. He told them he'd been captive for 5 hours. This time, the cops took it seriously. They had no idea,
Finally.
they couldn't have any idea of what they were about to find. First was a knife. Then one of them opened a drawer and pulled out some photographs. He almost fell back in shock. They were pictures of bodies, some dismembered, lying in certain poses. The cop went over to his partner and said, "These are for real." They then wrestled Dahmer to the floor, whereupon Dahmer managed to squeeze out the words, "For what I did, I should be dead." Once in restraints, he showed them
Mm-mm.
why. He opened the fridge door. Inside was a human head. Personnel from the Milwaukee County Medical
Disgusting, man.
Examiner's Office were soon on the scene working with the Milwaukee Police Department to photograph the apartment. They found a bunch of tools that could be used for dismembering bodies. They also found 7 skulls, some of them painted. Elsewhere, there were 4 human heads, 3 partially skeletonized bodies, a human heart, and what was described as large muscle fillets packaged in plastic bags. They found little food, and so it looked to them that Dahmer had been eating the bodies. The silk.
Oh my God, hold on now. So he wasn't just murking these people, he was also eating. So he's also a cannibal. He's not only psychotic, he's not only a serial killer, he's also a cannibal. How are you so many things? I mean, come on now. Come on now. When I thought it couldn't get worse, it just got worse. Like, what is going on with this man? Mm-mm.
Fillets were all frozen, just like little packages of pork. So
No.
there were the body parts. There were the drugs he used to sedate people. There were the photos, and there were the tools Dahmer had used. Forensic pathologists were soon able to say what the cause of death was with some of the victims, and they were able to make identifications. They discovered the skulls into which Dahmer had drilled, understanding what kind of injury that had caused. At this point, no one knew much about Dahmer, but when questioned, he told police he tried to create zombie sex slaves by lobotomizing his victims. He didn't deny what he'd done, and instead gave information that helped police identify his victims. Out of the 11 bodies found in his apartment, 4 could be identified with fingerprints. Other victims' IDs were at the apartment. The rest could be identified through dental records. Later, activists say the reason the police work had been shoddy was because of the fact that the victims had been gay. The majority of the victims had also been African American. On top of that, some people said because most of the victims had been
Mm-mm.
poor, it was a case of the less dead gone missing, meaning police don't work as hard when the victims are folks who live on the margins of society. But it was the 14-year-old who police had helped Dahmer take back to his apartment that really got the public angry.
Yeah.
That's why there were headlines like this: anger building over role of police in Dahmer case. The boy was Laotian. 2 of the women who tried to help him were black, which led people to say the white police officers hadn't paid enough attention to them out of some harbored racism. They believed Dahmer instead, who, as you know, killed the kid shortly after. The cop later defended himself, saying there was just nothing that stood out, or we would have seen it.
They told you that he was bleeding. What more do you want, sir? I don't understand these cops sometimes. I don't know if they're lazy, they don't want to do their job. I don't know what it is, but they gotta get whatever they got going on sorted out.
I've been doing this for a while, and usually, if something stands out, you'll spot it. There just wasn't anything there. On February 15th, 1992, Dahmer was sentenced to 15 consecutive life
Maybe that's not the job for you. Maybe go find some other jobs. I like the ones that actually, can see stuff and be like, okay, fine, this person bleeding. Obviously, something's wrong.
terms in prison. Another life sentence was later added on. In total, he killed 17 people. At the end of 1994, while serving time in prison, Dahmer was attacked by a man in the bathroom of the gym. He was bludgeoned with a metal bar to the point of death, and he did die shortly after in the hospital. The guy that killed him, also in for murder, later said Dahmer didn't make a single noise throughout the assault. When Dahmer's mother was approached by the media, she said,
What?
"Now is everybody happy? Now that he's bludgeoned to death, is that good enough for everyone?"
The mother, listen, oh my God, I don't want to be mean or nothing, but I don't want to hear nothing that the mother got going on. I don't, I know that's her son. She feels bad. Sure, whatever. Like, I don't care what you gotta say. And how about all the other people that the son killed? How about them? Girl, I don't care about you and how you feel. You suddenly care about nobody, right? And you also was neglecting your kid. You tried to murk yourself. You tried to do all these things instead of putting attention to your kid. And now you got want to play the victim, girl. If you don't get off my screen, seriously.
For a lot of Americans, it was a fitting end to a terrible story.
Yes, guys, this was the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.